Dreams are necessary. Without making an effort towards the seemingly unattainable and having the courage to try and bring those delusional fantasies into reality, humans would not have achieved our greatest feats.
Dreams are something you have to believe in. I almost gave up on mine. To all of you out there, please keep your dreams alive.
But there's always a catch. If you end up falling under the spell of dream chasing, you will always be haunted by an insatiable desire for more. This desire might be able to be temporarily quelled unless you live somewhere in the mountains and restrict yourself from a full existence, but it will always come back eventually, like a stray dog that you fed once out of pity. Most people never reach their dreams. They'll get a boost of motivation from setting the initial aspiration, but once those feel-good emotions wear off and they realize how much work is required for them to get even a fraction of the way there, they give up. Either that, or their unlucky set of circumstances and the cruelness of the world puts those dreams just out of reach. I am not one of those people, and I don't say this to be facetious or arrogant. I say it because I understand just how blessed I am to be in this position. I have acquired the #1 job that young kids want when they are asked about their dream career, being a YouTuber. For years, I struggled making any sort of progress with this channel. I had people constantly telling me it wasn't possible to become a real YouTuber, that I was crazy for thinking this could turn into a full-time job. But I kept letting that desire for more bite me, and in my case, that appetite paid off. I am one of the fortunate few to see what's on the other side of your dreams, and I want to tell you a story about what it looks like over here. I can't quite say for certain how you'll feel after this video. You might feel frustrated, you might feel confused, you might finally relax your shoulders for the first time in a week. But one thing is for certain, you will have a better understanding of the human condition, your own dreams, and what you should be doing with your life for this brief period of time we are here on Earth. This story doesn't actually begin with my YouTube career. It begins with a decade-old dream that could only be actualized after my success with YouTube. As a teenager, the idea of traveling the world always fascinated me. I had experienced small glimpses of what life could be like outside of the place you grew up when I'd take my yearly summer camping trip to Ithaca, New York, or when we would go to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, because my dad's old high school friend lived there. But other than that, my worldview was as narrow as it gets, unless you count going to Canada frequently as leaving the country, but I don't because I lived 10 minutes away from the Canadian border my entire life. There were many different places that intrigued me. France's Eiffel Tower, Italy's Leaning Tower of Pisa, Amsterdam to fuel my weed-addicted teenage brain. But the one place that felt like a completely different world to me was Japan. If you grew up during the golden era of cable, you might remember the Toonami program on Cartoon Network. Toonami was a part of Cartoon Network that only took place late at night on weekdays. They hosted some American cartoons like Space Ghosts and Thundercats, but they also aired some Japanese animation shows, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the official name of them now, which is anime. Naruto, Samurai Champloo, Inuyasha, Gundam, these were the shows that were rarely talked about in school, but loved in secrecy, because back then, anime was only reserved for the geeks and the weirdos. Times have changed a lot. Eventually, around the age of 15 or 16, I found out what country these shows came from, and I decided to do more research on anime's place of origin. Japan's cities looked like they came straight out of some futuristic anime. They had robots and gorgeous food, toilets that shoot water in your ass, and of course, insanely beautiful mountainscapes. Japanese TV shows were so strange, and I began to wonder why. Why did they feel so much different from the rest of the world? Why were they obsessed with karaoke and really bouncy cakes? And where did they get the inspiration to make such insanely over-the-top characters and settings in anime? Through these questions, I pictured my dream scenario. I'd go to Japan, stumble upon a brightly lit alleyway packed with small bars, go into one of them, and speak Japanese with the locals while we shared a beer. And who knows, maybe I'd even move there because I loved it so much. That was what I aspired for, so that was the dream I set. To one day go to Japan and experience this all for myself. Your dream is just one good decision away, and that is the decision to finally make an effort towards the life you want. In order to help you with pursuing that dream, I have partnered with today's sponsor, Skillshare. For a while now, I've been trying to level up my writing and my storytelling on this channel. Storytelling is one of the most valuable skills that I've ever developed, as it makes you more persuasive, more entertaining, more engaging, and it helps you understand your life and yourself better, hence why I am telling the lesson of this video through a story. With Skillshare, learning almost anything related to your dream becomes possible. It's the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across freelancing, entrepreneurship, content creation, photography, and a ton more. It's one of the best ways to stay committed towards the path of pursuing your dream, and the class titled Storytelling 101, Character, Conflict, Context, and Craft by Daniel Jose Oldair has been allowing me to continue my dream of becoming a master storyteller as well. So let this be your call to action. Maybe you've been thinking about what your dream is, but you haven't had solid grounds to start it on. You don't have a teacher, you don't know what skills you need. Now you have Skillshare. Take action. This is the first step, and click the first link in my description. The first 500 people to click that link will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can try it out for yourself before you even decide to commit to it long term. So go check that out right after this video. It was now 2024. I had enough financial padding to plan a trip to Japan, but I kept making excuses for why I hadn't done it yet. It wasn't the right time. I needed to study more Japanese so I could speak like a native and impress the locals. There's a few other things I need to take care of first, then I'll start thinking about it. The same sort of excuses everyone makes to put their dreams on hold forever. Finally, in January of this year, I broke through my excuses and stopped kidding myself. If not now, then when? That was the mantra I repeated as I searched for the flights, carved out time for the trip, and secured my tickets for October of this year. Now, this wasn't your usual 1 to 2 week vacation. I didn't want to feel like a tourist in a foreign country, and I knew that I would already have at least 10 months of studying the Japanese language under my belt by the time that I left. So I made the insane decision to stay for an entire month, 24 days to be exact, and live my dream just as if I was a Japanese native. It began in Japan's capital, Tokyo. The first morning I woke up, I already started to identify the similarities between the small pedestrian-filled streets of the ordinary animes I watched and the streets near our Airbnb. Power wires crisscrossing above your head in irrational patterns, cozy izakayas, aka Japanese restaurants with amber illuminated lights surrounded by paper lanterns that only had enough seats inside for 5 to 6 people, old, fit, fashionable people on bikes, lots of them, and even the more spacious buildings had interesting architecture. I started to assimilate to this new atmosphere, and excitement from the novelty of it all kept my pupils in a constant state of dilation. I couldn't understand why, but things just felt more colorful here. I'm sure the amount of different colored lights in the more populated city areas helped with that feeling, but the depth of this sensation went farther than my eyes could see. Perhaps it had to do with the politeness of the Japanese people. Compared to America, there were very specific rules regarding the respect of others. All workers in convenience stores and cashiers were required to use something called honorific language, which sounded very different from casual conversations, sometimes involving entirely different words. On the escalators, everyone stood on the left side, and those who needed to walk up them to get somewhere quickly used the right side. In train stations, everyone lined up in perfect formation one after another to avoid any chaos when getting on. The trains themselves were also radio silent, as being loud was generally seen as rude. And you cannot forget the bowing and apologizing either. Japanese people greet each other with bows, they say goodbye with bows, they bow when you walk past them, when you open doors for them, when you look at them. By the end of the trip, I had actually developed my own bowing habit, paired with the ever-popular word sumimasen, which means excuse me or I'm sorry. Or maybe it was the small connection that I felt whenever I put in the effort to use their language in our brief conversations. I was able to use my Japanese skills quite a bit on this trip, and although they didn't necessarily get too much better because I had stopped studying, it was still good enough to produce a handful of Nihongo jouzu desu, which literally translates to "your Japanese is very good." It happened a total of 10 times to be exact, and yes, I did count them. My Japanese really isn't very good though, they're just really nice there. Even though I couldn't pinpoint where the source of this colorful sensation of depth came from, I decided to shrug off the search for it. I had more important experiences to focus on. I was about to venture to Japan's countryside. A picturesque journey of rural Japan, featuring some of the most stunning green mountains and clear rivers I've ever seen, eventually led us to a small town called Takayama. It was a stark contrast from Tokyo. The town was completely surrounded by towering mountains, making it eerily quiet in some areas. In other areas, the sound of different animals filled the air like a creature concert. It was equally as beautiful as where we had first landed in Tokyo, but for different reasons. Here, we really got to take in the nature and history of Japan. One of my favorite experiences in Japan was stumbling into a local restaurant run by someone likely in their 60s or 70s. Someone who had clearly been doing this for several dozen years, with lots of old memorabilia hung up and a small TV playing in the corner of the room. It was the epitome of coziness, as if I was being served a meal by my mother herself. Things moved slowly but deliberately and with patience in small towns like these. Like much of Japan, they weren't in any rush to change, expand, or evolve. They just wanted to produce the same pleasant, simple comforts in the same location for decades. Maybe that opportunity to allow myself to be more present and calm was where this feeling of depth came from. But I had to continue on in my dream before I could answer that question. Osaka and Kyoto were next. It's not like these cities deserve to be categorized together, but by this point in the trip, the days were starting to melt together. Both were unforgettable for their own reasons, with Osaka being its iconic river in the middle of a cityscape, and Kyoto for its unbelievable temples and shrines. But what they did share, like every other city or town I went to, no matter what part of that place you were in, was the unimaginably good food. You know how good food looks in animes and more notably Studio Ghibli movies? While it may not resemble those foods exactly, it tastes just as good as that food looks. I mean, I can't even begin to describe just how perfect this aspect of the trip was. Mouth-watering tuna sushi, hamburger steaks, the absolute best curries you will ever have in your entire life, set meals with pickled vegetables, fresh fish, rice and miso soup, fried cream sandwiches, all kinds of sweets. If there's any contender for the strongest reason why you should absolutely visit Japan, I think it's this. The high I was riding from all these new sounds, sights, and thoughts spun around in my mind like a cribmobile hung above a baby. Until they didn't. Roughly 1 week before I would come back to America, my pupils began to return to their original size. There were small disappointments that I swept under the rug up until this point because the surprises of Japan kept overshadowing them, but now there was no escaping them. You see, while Japan might look like some sort of anime cyberpunk paradise to the average outsider, the people that actually live here can't share the same sentiments. While everybody was extremely polite and respectful, it felt like the collectivism was so strong that nobody really had a chance to fully express themselves. Nobody wore any colors other than gray, black, blue, or white, which reflected the complete lack of individualism and strong homogeneity. Speaking out, doing things differently, or going against the grain is strongly frowned upon. Harassment on the trains is a fairly common experience for women. The faces of the Japanese, both young and old, didn't give off a satisfied energy either. If anything, the energy I could feel from the average native was one that screamed, "Let me out." Japan's work culture also might be the only place that is more toxic than America. Salarymen, which is the name for the average male worker, often revolve their entire lives around work, and when they aren't working, they will drink themselves silly until they pass out on the street. There's also a word for the completely isolated, hikikomori, which is used for people who are unemployed and don't interact with anyone in the outside world for potentially years. Many small Japanese towns have thousands of vacant homes due to Japan's rapidly declining birth rate, and this has led to the weakening of the Japanese currency as well. A lot of this was just speculation from my end and stuff that was based off what I heard on the internet, but I finally got a chance to confirm those suspicions when I met up and spoke with a Japanese native. Yoshi, who I connected with through an app I used to chat with Japanese people while I was studying in America, sat down with me to record an entire interview regarding the reality of living in Japan, which I have now posted on my second channel. And I suggest you go check it out and subscribe to that channel immediately after this video. Please. But to give you a glimpse of that interview and to sum it up in his words, he said, quote, "Nobody here is truly living life." By the end of the trip, going through the motions one might if they lived in Japan, a sentence kept echoing through my head. I want to go home now. This is nowhere close to being a hit piece on Japan. Those 3.5 weeks were some of the most unforgettable of my entire life, and it hit so many expectations. It's a beautiful place with wonderful, caring people and a rich culture, and to be honest, being home for a couple days now, I already miss it. But my Japan trip was the epitome of what you'll experience on the other side of your dreams. You start off hopeful with the ideal future that dream will bring you. You identify the steps it will take to get there, and you start. It's frustrating and you feel like you aren't making progress, but as long as you can adopt the same feelings you think you'll feel when you reach that point and put yourself in the shoes of your future self, you can get through whatever kind of struggle those steps will give you. You start seeing that first bit of progress. The dream is starting to become closer to reality. Again you stumble, again you fall, and you start to wish you never had this stupid idea to achieve this thing that's bigger than yourself in the first place. But that dream keeps calling out to you, waiting. So you pick yourself back up. You try to make it work. If the dream is still there, you're still showing up. You are certain you can get there now, and you're even more certain that the dream will feel exactly the way it feels in your head. And suddenly, you're there. For a while, it feels like you're floating. Like this was the final thing you needed to complete your life, to find that thing that makes everything else less confusing and maddening. But you still have to wake up in the morning. You haven't escaped this body. You're still you. You're still human, and that means there will always be something new to chase. I'm not trying to discourage you from following your dreams. I may have titled this video something along the lines of that, but the title is always missing the deeper context. You may never truly understand what I'm talking about here unless you achieve some level of the dream you have. But if you happen to be one of the lucky few, I want you to be prepared. It's okay to desire more. The first few times I conquered a big goal and I felt almost the exact same as I had before I had conquered it, I used to think there was something wrong with me. But now I've come to realize that that is how life is supposed to be. Life is an endless series of chasing a feeling. And although that sounds rather morbid or depressing, it can be a really beautiful thing if you chase the right feelings. So go ahead, create those ideals, follow your dreams, and achieve them. And when you come out of the other side and realize it wasn't what you had thought it would be, recognize that pattern, accept it, and go again. The real dream you are searching for isn't the one you're running after in your head. It's the reality that sets in after you reach it. This dream wouldn't have been possible without you guys. I love you guys so much. Thank you for continuing to support me, for continuing to show up and watching my videos that, I don't know, might not be that great sometimes, and I have a lot of doubts about what I make sometimes, but you guys keep showing up and I really appreciate you. This would not be possible without you. Thank you so much. If you want to watch another one of my videos that's kind of along the same lines of this, check this out, where it's a very artistic style of video and teaches a good lesson. I'm leaving now. Goodbye. Go do that shit that you need to do.